everyone. I'm Vicki Hill, your Sunday morning gospel host on KISS 107.1, as well as the Vice President of Women of Colors. Tonight, we are having a conversation. In fact, the title is Time to Have a Conversation. Tonight, we're going to be talking about racial disparities in healthcare. It's been a while since we've been on and talked to you. So, you know what? It's going to be an exciting, informational conversation. And I want you to all take a listen to all the things that are going to be said. And, we're going to give you some great information. It's always great to share information because information, as they say, knowledge is power, right? Oh, yeah, definitely. So we're going to be talking tonight. And I've got a few ladies that are going to join me on this panel. And we're just going to talk about racial disparities in healthcare, things that we can learn about the healthcare system, how we may be able to make it better, what progress is being made, if any, or how we can join in on that fight to make it better. All right. So joining me tonight are a few ladies. I've got Dr. Kai Anderson. Dr. Kai Anderson is Associate Director, Psychiatry Residency, Assistant Professor, Director of Psychotherapy Training, Director, Ambulatory, boy, that's a hard one to say, Behavioral Health Services from Central Michigan University College of Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Kai.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Also, we have Dr. Pamela Ross McClain, Ph.D. All right. She is the Chief Officer of Cultural Belonging and Community Building at Delta College right here in the city. Welcome, Dr. Pam.
Thank you. Good evening.
You're welcome. And of course, we have Miss Evelyn McGovern, who is the co-founder, president of Women of Colors. Welcome, Evelyn.
Welcome. I'm not a doctor.
You can be a doctor in your own mind.
That's what it'll be too.
That's what we want to be. Well, tonight, as I've told everybody that's listening or that's looking on, we're going to be talking tonight. We're just having a conversation about racial disparities in healthcare, right? So we're going to talk about some things and give some information and share some resources as well. It's always good to share those resources to let people know where they can go and find good healthcare or good information to help enrich their lives, right? Absolutely. So we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to ask you a question. What are health and healthcare disparities? What does that mean? Let's explain that to the folks that are listening in case they don't quite understand why and what we're talking about tonight.
Okay, I'd like to start with that question, if that's okay, Ms. Hill.
Fine.
I'd like to give some background about our health system before I answer the question. As we know, systemic racism is embedded in all institutions in our society. That includes healthcare, that includes education, that includes housing, employment, and our justice systems. And our healthcare system has historically engaged in discriminatory, racist practices, beginning with the experimentation of slaves, which has led to deeply entrenched disparities in healthcare that persist today. So what does it look like today? Healthcare disparities include lack of access to care, lack of funding for Black institutions, lack of Black doctors, and different patterns of behaviors that lead to different practices that lead to different outcomes for different diseases.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Anybody else want to join in there?
I honestly think Dr. Kai covered everything, but for me, it's been interesting to see that in every social system that exists, when you look at the experiences of people of color, in particular African Americans, you can see that we are underserved by those systems. There are differences in our health outcomes. There are differences in things like infant mortality rate, you name it. The lack of culturally responsive providers is having a health toll and a health care toll on the African American community in particular.
Perfect. Okay, so let me ask this question, and I've got another one to follow up with it. Why is it important to even address the health disparities? Why is that important?
Well, as Dr. Pam Ross McClain mentioned, there are several differences in the data that looks at minorities and white individuals. For example, looking at death rates, particularly during the time of COVID-19, death rates of Hispanics, American Indians, Alaskan Natives, and Blacks were far more than white Americans. This has led to a decreased life expectancy of 7 to 8 years for Blacks, American Indians, Alaskan Natives because of those disparities. Look at maternal mortality, dying while you're pregnant. The rate for Black Americans is 4 to 5 times higher than for white Americans. Those are just some of the examples of the healthcare disparities that exist. So it's really a matter of life and death. We really need to address this.
Absolutely.
Dr. Kai took the words out of my mouth because I was really just going to say addressing these disparities, helping people to be conscious of these staggering statistics, literally is a matter of life and death. This is not just a figurative thing one says. People are dying at alarmingly different rates because of inept systems. And if we don't monitor those systems, if we don't address those systems, we're going to continue to see these patterns of death being disproportionately represented in communities of color.
Okay. So when we say it's important to address the healthcare disparities, what are you telling me I need to do? Do I need to go and stand in front of the healthcare facilities and with my little, pole up with my sign up and march around? What do I need to do? Do I need to call on maybe a few doctors and discuss it? Do I need to get to administration? How do we address this? It's easy to say we need to address these things, but if you don't give us the tool, if you don't give us directions, if you don't give us guide, we really don't know what to do. Does that make sense?
It makes perfectly good sense to me. And so I'm going to maybe jump out here a little bit on this. You listed a lot of things that one might do, right? But I would say all of the above, depending on how you choose to wage war against this epidemic problem. And I can say, for me, a very simple thing that I've been able to do in my own personal life is I insist on getting the care that I deserve when I'm trying to get care in my own life. I mean, I have been in situations where I have been talked down to by physicians. I have had physicians not try to help me understand their diagnoses of me. I have had culturally unresponsive clinicians who didn't even understand what I was saying because they were so lost in their so-called unconscious bias, which may not even be all that unconscious. And so, some people do it through conducting research that really shines a light on the experiences of folks who've been left out of the research literature. Other people, are historical revisionists. And so they tell you about things like the Tuskegee experiment and why certain communities have a healthy dose of distrust for the medical system. But I actually truly believe that people don't go into helping and healing professions to kill people, right? And so I like to think that we can partner with the health professions so that we can help educate them from our own cultural vantage point using the data that is hidden in plain sight and say, we need to help you find a solution to this problem.
That was good, Dr. Pam. It kind of, when you talked about your own witness of maybe your physicians, I thought about mine because sometimes I would go into my doctor's office and, when she would walk in, she'd say two things and out she was ready to go. And I would stop her. I'm like, hello, where you going? and she would turn around and look and I say, look, I've got questions and I need answers for those questions. I don't understand all the medical jargon, and so I need you to break it down to me so that I understand what's going on. And then I need to really tell you what I'm feeling and what's happening within my body. I need you to know at that. 5 minutes won't do it for me. So I've done that a few times to her. So she stopped. Now she knows me, and she'll stand there and she'll say, you got any more questions? Well, absolutely I do. Because see, when I walk in, I know I've got to pay you that doctor's fee, that office fee for coming in there. So I have a list of things that I need to talk about. And I want answers to those things, or at least try to help me find some answers. Don't just tell me, okay, well, it's going to be all right. No, no, I need to know more. So we have to be our own advocate for our own health, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And I would like to say that it's not, your white coat doesn't protect you. There were several physicians during the height of the COVID pandemic that died because they did not receive adequate care because of the color of their skin. There was a large Facebook following for Dr. Susan Moore, who actually was not able to get care that she needed as a physician at a well-respected facility, who died. So again, these unconscious or conscious biases don't discriminate regardless of your occupation, the socioeconomic level. It's just based on systemic and structural racism that contributes to these disparate outcomes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, that was going to be my next question too. But I do have a question to kind of change the subject a little bit. Uh, I would like Dr. Pam to share a little bit about the racial disparity in behavioral health grant that women of colors received um, in 2021, and we finished up last year. We received a $200,000 grant from the Michigan Health Endowment Fund to determine why African Americans are less likely to receive health care in behavioral health than any other population. And so,
So
Doctor,
I'll
go ahead.
just give a high level synopsis of it. So um, when Evelyn approached me and told me that women of colors had been awarded this grant to figure out what was going on in the African American community that might present barriers to why people who could go back to follow up care after an emergency visit weren't following through, we set off on quite a journey, right? And so, what we were actually doing is what academics would call community based participatory research. And it's a really dynamic way of doing research where you enlist the folk who you are studying to partner with you to guide the research so that you can elevate their voices. You can empower them with the tools of how to do research, and you can honor the fact that this high research that we've been doing is not coming up with the right answers, with the right solutions. People don't trust um, sometimes researchers to be forthright about their lived experiences. So we actually took a somewhat of a phenomenological approach, meaning that we sought out African Americans who had lived experiences with the behavioral health care experience, with the behavioral health care system. We used several strategies to capture their data. We did a survey. We did one-on-one interviews. We did listening sessions, and we found some really compelling findings about what they were experiencing that caused them not to go back. And sometimes it was just not having providers that they could relate to. It was the stigma that was attached to needing help. It was just a poor treatment experience. It was over prescription. They felt like folks just wanted to shove drugs at them. And so there were all of these, but then there was also this sense that sometimes there were some unseen, findings. Like some people said, I hold myself accountable because, rather than seek the care I need, I just leaned on the Lord. You know what I mean? Because it was just too much for me to go back to a system where I'm being doubly oppressed by the system and the needs that I need to have filled. So for me, this was an inciting project because It allowed women of colors to mobilize multiple stakeholders to be the foot soldiers for really going out into our community and figuring out what's going on so that we can share that with others. And then in the next phase, not just talk about it, but think about what we can do about it. And in the phase 2, we are going to be looking at how we can get critical peers in the emergency departments so that they can help people who they can relate to through a program that is called Project Assert. I won't go into much details about that, but thank you for the question.
That's awesome. Vicki was one of our interviewers. Vicki, can you talk a little bit about your experience as an interviewer, and then I'll share my experience as also in the group session with.
I did a lot of one-on-ones, and I did do some group sessions as well, but the one-on-ones were eye-opening, to say the least. To be able to sit in front of somebody and let them tell you, what they're going through and how they weren't being helped. They were pretty much being shoved a lot of drugs. And the drugs, of course, we know drugs have side effects, but these drugs were having some devastating side effects, and it really wasn't helping the people. They talked about the drugs that they were on. They talked about, they go to their physician, they sit there, they tell their physician what's happening with them. And it was as though the physician didn't care, just sat there and would write on a piece of paper or draw on a piece of paper and push them to the next person. So they felt like they really didn't have good representation when it came to the medical field. They felt like they had no place to go. So they felt like, what's the sense of me going when you're just going to give me another drug that's going to make me feel even worse? It's not helping the situation, or you're not really listening to what I have to say. It's important, like I said, for us to advocate for our own health. But when you are trying to do that and you're sitting in front of your physician or psychiatrist or psychologist, and they're really not listening to you, you feel lost. A lot of those people felt lost. A lot of them felt lost. I felt bad for them because they were people crying out for help and they couldn't seem to find that help. So a lot of times they would sit in front of me and they would cry. They would sit in front of me and they would tell me about their symptoms. Some sat in front of me and told me that they just wanted to end it all. They just didn't want to go on living anymore because they couldn't find the help that they needed.
Wow.
It was eye-opening and devastating, and it was really hard to listen to. It really was. It was hard to keep your composure and not cry along with that person because you felt so bad for them and you just felt their pain. You felt their pain.
And you were doing one-on-ones, and I was in the group sessions with 6 or 7 people. And then when you hear all of their individual stories, and they were so happy that we were there listening, and we were people that looked like them, that we were really empathetic to what they were saying. And what I realized most of all is a lot of the barriers that they're struggling with, they're generational. This is something that just didn't happen yesterday, last year, 5 years ago. This has been generations of pain, and it's continuing. And I thought I was a strong woman. I've been through a lot, heard a lot, seen a lot. But that right there, that broke me. That really was an eye opener. Words cannot express.
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms.
No, go ahead, Dr. Kai.
And I am so grateful for the feedback because as a provider and as an educator that trains providers, we want to know what we can do to really connect with our patients. And so this was very eye-opening for our residents. We presented at our residency conference for them to really understand that we really need to make sure that our practices are culturally responsive to the community that we're serving. We have to, I'm a firm believer in listening to our patients and listening to their lived experiences. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to provide the care that they need. I'm sorry.
Right. No, I'm sorry. And Dr. Kai, a lot of the people, the patients, the people that we were talking to felt like the people sitting in front of them that were supposed to be helping them were just sitting there for a paycheck. They didn't care about them at all.
But can I just add on here? Because whenever people use the word systemic and structural racism, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing people who are in those systems, but I do think that they have to own the fact that they're agents in those systems that are marred by racism. So if you're not anti-racism, doing something about it, then you are a part of the problem. And I want to give you just a simple example of this, right? So structural and maybe even systemic, I kind of see it as structural. I'm supposed to have a physical soon, and I have put on some weight, and I know it. And my doctor is going to get out a chart that was not made for African American women.
Absolutely.
And I am going to feel bad when I go in there and she reminds me that I have not been keeping my promises, right? So much so that I'm thinking about not doing that physical because I just don't want to go in there and go through that ordeal. But the reality is there are standards that have been created for someone else that don't fit our culture, don't fit. And I'm not trying to make a case for obesity. Please don't think that I'm trying to do that. But when people are overlaying a standard on you that is inappropriate for your culture, for your group, that then does not give you the responsive care, the culturally responsive care that is customized to your individual needs. And so that's just one small example, but it's just disheartening when you see the devastating outcomes of that mismatch between providers and the clients.
And I agree 100%, Dr. Pam. And in fact, we are looking at that as physicians, and we're actually rallying against using those standardized measures, whether it's BMI, whether it's pulmonary function test, whether it's the test we use to establish kidney function. They're all based on norms that are not culturally specific. So we definitely need to do a better job at treating each patient as an individual with individual problems. And I hope with continued education that we can continue to change our institutions.
Mm-hmm.
So as you were saying, Dr. Kai, it's not the social economic it's not the social economics that's causing the barriers. It's just the racism is just that's basically it. It has to be.
As you think about it, I was very surprised to see that your life expectancy is based on where you live.
Right.
I looked at my zip code where I live. I looked at individuals that live in Saginaw. I'm going to live 8 years longer from where I live now, but based on where I lived when I grew up, I'm going to live 15 years longer. This is based on my life expectancy according to the charts, based on my zip code, and that is abhorrent. That your life expectancy is based on your zip code, and that is because of the structural institutions that lead to disparities in all areas of our life: where we sleep, what kind of foods we eat, what kind of air we breathe, access to parks, access to good health care, access to education. All those things affect our life. So, as you said, we really have to look at the structures that we take for granted that we need to kind of work on overcoming. And how do we address it? As Vicki mentioned, as patients, you demand good care. As educators, you work on changing institutions. And as individuals, you work on changing the laws that contribute to these disparate outcomes.
And not only demand good care, we deserve good care, right?
Right.
Definitely.
Right. Everyone does. Everyone. No one should be excluded.
I think the problem becomes when people are having to make a shift, right? We fought for equality for so long that
Yeah.
people think that one size fits all, that treating everyone the same is what they should be doing. When the reality is, you're not treating everyone the same per se. You're treating them the way your standard says is appropriate for them to be treated. And it is not appropriate because it's not a one size fits all, and and I want to remain optimistic because again, I don't think people spend all these years to be in health professions to be a part of these disparities that we are seeing, that are just mind-boggling at times. And Evelyn, you raised the question of race and socioeconomics, and I think that so often they run neck and neck that people can't disaggregate the two, right? And so they just assume that it's not it. How do I want to say? Even someone who is in a whole different socioeconomic bracket, as Dr. Kai was saying, her medical doctor friends and others who have they're still not being served by the system in spite of the not having the socioeconomic challenges. So it's not a poverty. People don't want to name it what it is. It is racism. And that's the ugly thing that we want to feel like we're moving away from, but we're still entrenched in it in ways that has just morphed and evolved in modern day times. And that's why I think our generation does have to take up that work of dismantling systems of racism. Otherwise, this is just going to proliferate indefinitely.
And I'll give you an example. This happened to me personally. I had good insurance, right? Went into the hospital, the emergency room, and was looking for service. I was in excruciating pain. I could barely stand up. And I asked the attendant to just find me somewhere to just lay down until they could see me. They didn't have to see me until they, a physician was available. But they told me to go lay on the floor. And that did it for me. That did it for. He didn't even see my insurance or anything. That didn't even matter. Just me walking in the door was enough to just tell me lay on the floor.
I am so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
That
beyond, hurt.
That is beyond.
That's something I'll never ever forget when I go to it. ED.
And as you said, you will never ever forget that. So that's going to color how you interact with health professionals henceforth. That's going to erode that trust that you have in your health profession. That's something that we have to really work hard to change. Unfortunately, as Dr. Pam said, these unconscious and conscious thoughts are there, and we have to actively work at helping people to become anti-racist. And they've done studies recently looking at white medical students, and they have these beliefs that Blacks can endure more pain, that they're not as smart as whites, and all these beliefs that their skull sizes are smaller, and thus the brains are smaller. All these beliefs that are still existing today that should have been discarded years ago. So we have a lot of work to do to change people's ideas.
You're so right. And as a person who studied Afro-American and African history for 2 of my degrees, if you think about the campaign that entrenched those wrong thinkings, that we're just like one chromosome short of being apes. I mean, do we think that stuff is not going to be in their psyches, is not going to be in their conscious or unconscious way of processing others? We have to really dismantle that wrong thinking that just has not been challenged. I'm an educator by profession. And one of the things I notice is that my students who had maybe never had an experience, a real relationship with an African-American person, knew all the stereotypes about our ability to learn, think, excel, our tendencies to buy. So where is that coming from if you haven't even had an opportunity to engage with another human being that happens to be different from you because of their race? So this work that we have to do to dislodge it there were multiple forces conspiring to entrench those awful belief systems to justify enslaving Africans. So we've got work to do to unslave, to unshackle those wrong thoughts.
I know what women of colors can do is what we're doing right now, is having these conversations, and just hope and pray we have some providers that's listening this evening that can share some of this information. And it would be great if some of those providers can have a listening session and hear some of their clients and how they truly feel.
And going back to what you said, Evelyn, the way you were treated when you went into the ER. Now, the average person that goes, and you're an average person, I'm not saying you're not,
No,
but
I
to walk into a facility, into the emergency room, and you're treated like that, first of all, it's definitely going to affect your trust as far as, going to a place where you are supposed to go to get help and you're treated in this manner. That's going to be a barrier, don't you think? That's
definitely
a barrier. So the next time they're going to say, well, I'm not going down there. They're not going to do anything anyway. They're going to tell me to go lay on the floor. They're not going to help me. They're going to treat me bad. So therefore, that's going to affect that person's health, because that person is not going to be able to get the help that they need. Therefore, whatever medical condition is going on in their life is going to continue. It's going to get worse because they've lost the trust in the medical professionals. Am I right?
Right.
And that's why those disparities exist, Vicky, for that reason, because there's no trust that you're going to get the care that you deserve and that you need. And it perpetuates in all areas.
I actually know I'm not supposed to be asking questions, but I have one. We are very clear on what's going wrong in these systems.
Yes.
And how people are being treated badly. I could tell you stories too. But Dr. Kai, in your experience, are there people who are really championing anti-racist practices that we could shine a light on for other practitioners? Because even though I felt really empowered doing the community-based participatory research project and elevating the voices of communal informants, a lot of times people don't listen to folk who aren't in the same, field, same credentials as them. So there have to be people who are taking up this research and modeling what you can do when you get culturally appropriate care. So could you maybe give me a little hope here?
And that's a very good question. There's lots of hope. Dr. Cameron Jones has done excellent work in this area. She continues to educate people on implicit bias, unconscious bias, structural racism, what to do about it. I give a shout out to my institution at CMU. I've done several lectures for the faculty, for the community on dismantling racism, and they're a strong supporter of continuing to allow me to do that. There's several physicians around the country that are working on addressing anti-racism. So we are definitely cognizant of the need to address it and actively working to address it. I think it's even more important to do it now, given the climate in which we are facing right now, and the determination to decrease the talk about anti-racism. And I think we have to really make our voices heard even louder now.
Go ahead, Dr. Pam.
No, I was just saying thank you, because I know the pandemic just magnified everything. It just really let us see things that were already there, but even on a larger scale. So thank you for that encouragement that there is lots of good work underway.
So in fact, Michigan Public Health Institute is sponsoring a training on trauma, and I'm doing a training on culture-specific trauma in Marquette on Monday. So there's definitely people that are encouraging to
awesome. This. So Dr. Pam, I want to answer that question too as an average person. I want to answer that question. So me as an average person, the way I could manage that is speak up and speak out. And just like at that incident at the ED, I complained and I let the powers that be, I let them know what happened. I wasn't quiet about it. And we have to speak up, even if it's not the individual that's going through that experience. Someone that witnessed it could very well do the same thing. We need to help each other, as well as ourselves.
What if the people don't know how to speak up? Should we have we've got a great platform here, right? So we're speaking to people on 5 different radio stations and on Facebook as well. So we're getting the word out there, but not everybody has the technology, right? So what should we do? Should we have maybe should we have a workshop and educate the people that are sitting there and teach them how to speak up? Some people are afraid to do so. They don't know what the outcome's going to be. So should we have something where we've got this, we're sitting on a panel and we're letting the people voice their opinions, and we talk as a whole and we tell them, this is what you need to do. This, maybe you go this direction. Maybe this will help you when you go back this way. This is how you speak up. Because if you don't say anything, nothing gets done. So we have to say anything. We have to say something.
You said it beautifully, Vicki. And I would just add on to that by saying people need more than general sound bites and strategies. They need localized,
Yes.
customized ways to protest. It's relational. And so a lot of times when academics make everything systemic or structural, that's their way of, to me, of projecting it on this framework of systems and structures. But I'm going to tell you right now, people maintain those structures.
Yes.
So we need to empower people not just with what to say, who to say it to, how to say it, and who are the movers and the shakers and the change makers that you need to make sure that you're getting an audience with, the influencers, if you will. And so even in the project, I'm going to tell you, I'm so tired of Evelyn calling herself average, because she knows everybody and somebody, and there's nothing average about that. All I had to do was step into her intricate, well-crafted network of peers. And if you want a doctorate, they got these honorary doctorates. And for all this work you've been doing in women of color, that seems honorary doctorate worthy to me. But I'm being very serious here. It takes people connecting people to the people who created and sustain these systems to help rethink and reform these systems. And so I love what you're saying. Yes, we do need to be, just like they taught them how not to get killed while they were doing nonviolence protests during the civil rights movement. We need similar training for modern day problems.
Absolutely. And you said we need to connect to people, but I don't know those connections. So therefore, I need somebody to connect me, right? I need somebody to connect me to the right person. Not everybody knows who to call, what to do, and how to go to them. And that's the reason I, kind of brought that up.
I agree with you, and I'm going to make something up now because that's what academics get to do. You know how they talk about asset mapping so that our communities aren't painted in these broad strokes of just being devoid of any assets? We need to also do ally and advocate mapping so you know who the movers and shakers are and the doers. And I'm telling you, that's what Evelyn did. She know everybody who knows somebody who can do some stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so once you get in those networks and you get at the right tables,
Right.
then you can get some momentum and tracking. And this is a really ripe time for that because the federal government and the state government systems who give away lots of money, they're starting to realize, if you don't have some partners, if you don't have some authentic relationships with folk, we might not want to give you our money because we need multifaceted, synergistic solutions to these very complex problems that we are funding and not coming away with any solutions that are getting any traction.
Right.
And Women of Colors has those resources, those connections to make these projects happen.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a compliment.
Yes.
And you know what's even sweeter? It's all of us are members of Women of Colors.
Yes.
So very true. So very true.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my next question is, what is the most significant health barrier for minorities? What do you think?
Health barrier.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that one of the primary ones is lack of access to good care.
Absolutely.
to care where you feel you are valued, you are heard, you are respected. And I
Absolutely.
think once we figure out the best way to provide that, we will make a dent in these healthcare disparities.
So, Dr. Kai, now I'm finding that they have more assistants, physician assistants, more so than you see a doctor.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? What's going on with that? Is a shortage of doctors, or what's going on? Can you help us with that?
There's a shortage of physicians, and it's projected to be even more of a shortage as the population continues to age. And in
Oh,
particular, there is a shortage of physicians in rural areas. So that is why you may see more advanced practitioners, whether it's a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner. And that's why it is vital to ensure that we're educating everyone in the healthcare field regarding these healthcare disparities and what can be done to overcome them.
Now, does that healthcare assistant physician know as much as my doctor? Because I had a doctor's appointment just this past week, and I canceled it because I couldn't get there. But I rescheduled it, and she said, would you like to see the assistant practitioner?" And I kindly said, "No, I want to see my doctor."
So I work with some wonderful advanced nurse practitioners and physician assistants, and I think that they are very valuable and invaluable to the field of medicine. But their training is different. We receive extensive training in providing care for patients. Their training is not as extensive as ours, so our knowledge bases are different, which is why in most states, for nurse practitioners, are required to be supervised by a physician.
Okay.
So I think that at any point, if you feel as if the care you're getting is not what you should be getting, you have the right to ask to see a different provider with different training.
so you would have to see a different provider instead of the physician that the assistant is training under.
No, you could ask to see the physician that the
Oh,
nurse
okay.
practitioner is working with, or the physician assistant is working with, if you feel that the care that they're providing is not based on the appropriate standards.
I just
And
felt like my doctor knew me. And I
mhm,
just felt like I was more comfortable because I've been seeing her for the longest. She knows my chart. She knows I'm going to make her stay there until she answers all my questions and help me understand. And this other person that's coming in, I don't feel like they know me. They're just looking in my chart. And then that also brings up the question in my mind, as a African American woman, should I seek out someone who looks like me? Will I get better care? Will I get different care? First of all, they're definitely going to understand me because we have similar situations. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
yes. And in fact, the research, Pam talks about no research and lived experiences, but research does substantiate what we kind of know, that if individuals have similar experiences, if they understand your life, they may relate to you better, and they may be able to provide care that is more targeted towards your individual needs. Looking at Black men, when they're treated by Black male physicians, their ability to do better is markedly improved because of those lived experiences and those similarities. And in fact, in psychiatry, the most important predictor of whether or not a patient is going to be successful is how much they bond with their provider. So
Mm.
having that connection, having that trust is vital. If you don't trust your provider, feels like they are providing you the best care, you're not going to take the medication. You're not going to do what they ask. You're not going to tell them what they really need to know to provide the best treatment for you. So that's very important, to feel comfortable with your provider.
So, it's funny because I defer to Dr. Kai because she is speaking from experience, and she's talking about, the research that supports the need to bond. And Vicki, you've basically said the same thing that the research is saying. You're like, I want a relationship with this person. I have a relationship with them. So for me, regardless, if the person is competent enough to get me care, I'd rather have someone that doesn't have a higher credential, but I have a relationship with them, than to have somebody with a higher credential, but they treat me with disrespect,
Absolutely.
because for me, I have to have a connection. And that's cultural as well.
Absolutely.
African Americans are very communal, very collectivist in the way that we think about ourselves and other members of the community. So it would help if you could have a physician or a provider that comes from that tradition. But I will also say that there just aren't enough professionals to go around, period. So when people say things like, we need teachers that look like the kids, absolutely, bring them on. But what's going to happen while we're waiting for the development of all of those? We need all hands on deck, making sure that whoever takes that oath to sign up for that work is not doing harm. So we've got to get more, but we've also got to educate those in the pipeline, because we need all hands on deck. All hands.
I agree 100%.
Yes. Dr. Kai, I got another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you might be a little biased on this question, but I know you answered the best you can. The question is, do you think everyone should seek counseling, whether they're in distress? You know how you get a physical for your body, but do you need a physical for your mind? You know,
Of
for
course,
your mental health.
Of course,
Go ahead.
As a psychiatrist, I'm going to be biased, Evelyn. Of course, because I do believe that the brain controls the body. You know, if you don't have sound mental health, your physical health is going to be at risk. So I do think that it's okay to talk about things with a trusted person. It may not have to be a psychiatrist or a therapist, but we have to get rid of the stigma that you can't talk about things that are bothering you. That if you talk about things, you're considered to be weak, or you can't air your dirty laundry. I think it's important to recognize that we have to have sound mental health, and that it has to be a priority.
But some people think they have sound mental health, and you don't really know, because they haven't really been diagnosed to say. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just wondering, it couldn't hurt, that's for sure.
Exactly. And I do think that as we look at our education systems, that we're beginning to hopefully identify that there should not be stigma associated with getting help to ensure that you are okay. You know, to just get a checkup to make sure that
get a checkup. It's okay. Yeah. You don't have to show any signs. Just get a checkup and see if it's something that's there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're doing a lot more of that in the educational systems now, where they're actually doing more screenings and talking more about the fact that it is okay to really talk about what problems you have, and it's okay to need to talk to someone.
Well, I need to make an appointment.
Well, you know, it's if I could just jump in here a little bit. So I recently went through a mental health first aid training at work so that we could intervene and respond appropriately when people might be showing symptoms of mental health challenges on the job, right? Mental health first aid. And I was like, wow, this is really good. We're not in a position to diagnose or treat any of that, but just noticing shifts in moods, noticing, patterns that aren't typical for people. And so, I would love to see everyone get a mental health checkup and get appropriate care and it be destigmatized. But there are times when I struggle a little bit now, because it feels like they keep coming out with all these labels that they put on people. And sometimes I think I've been in situations where I was in graduate school and I was trying to get counseling. And if a person can't hear me, and they're just going to a little book in the back of their room to tell me what's wrong with me, that could have me misdiagnosed and adopting a mental health challenge that's not even really a mental health challenge for me. And so I struggle with making sure the diagnoses are appropriate, because people really understand what people who they're not accustomed to talking about are communicating. And so, I mean, even with I'm much more agile in the public school space. But when you tell kids that this one has this and that one has that, you know, they become that label and they're not humanized or seen holistically. And sometimes I think that that can box folks into stuff that isn't even the right box for them, and or coupled with a treatment plan or an intervention that can help them thrive in spite of something that folk have sort of categorized them as. I'm struggling with words here, but I agree with what you're saying. Mental health is something that we all need to be thinking about, and we do not need to be ashamed about taking care of our mental health. But I worry sometimes that people are over diagnosing for profit. You know what I mean? And that to me is also troubling.
Mm. Mm.
And that is also very important because we do know that there are different diagnoses that may be given to Black patients at higher rates than white patients. For example, everyone that hears voices does not have schizophrenia. No, it could be due to trauma. It could be due to depression. It could be due to lots of things. But the studies have shown that Blacks are diagnosed with schizophrenia at higher rates than other individuals because of them not understanding what that person is talking about. So it is important when you seek care that you again demand to get the care that's based on your symptoms, your life, the way that you move throughout this world, and not based on a universal diagnosis based on something that you've read about, but that's not based on your life experiences. So you have to challenge your clinicians if you feel the
Thank you.
diagnosis is inaccurate. You should feel comfortable doing that.
Thank
Okay.
you for saying that. And I think, you know, a lot of us are afraid to do that because we see doctors as, you know, they're on this pinnacle of knowledge. And it's sort of like, who am I to challenge this person that society has put at the highest rung of intellect and expertise, you know? And I mean, I consider myself to be averagely intelligent, you know, and it's amazing to me, even when I go to the doctor sometime, you know, I'm not talked to like an intelligent partner in having a discussion about my health. I don't know a lot that they know, but I'm intelligent enough to be a part of the conversation about what's appropriate for me. And so sometimes when I've run into that condescending behavior, I'm shocked that I haven't pushed back more, because I'm certainly not afraid to express myself. But there is a power dynamic there that I can imagine silences a lot of people because they just, as Vicky said earlier, don't have the tools to effectively communicate their concerns. And so I think we can all take a page from Vicky, because her doctor already knows I got to book an hour for her if she's coming. I'm just playing with you. But I'm not mad at you. You are paying. You deserve to get the treatment that you deserve.
Absolutely. And I feel like you need to take the time to help me understand what you're telling me. I mean, when you look at, okay, so all of the tests that we do now, for me, it goes into my chart, right? I am one that's going to look at every single thing on my chart. I look at all of it. Well, I don't understand all of those little codes and what the range means. I need to know. I need to know if I'm in trouble, if I'm headed for trouble, if I'm good. You need to explain that to me. And that's just the way I feel. That's the way I have to advocate for my own health, because nobody else is going to do this. It has to be me, because it's my health. So I need to know, okay, just like I said, when I look down my bilirubin, when I look down all my comprehensive, when I look down all that other stuff that's in my chart there on that little app, I got questions. I need answers. You need to help me understand, because I didn't go to school to be a doctor. I don't know the knowledge that Dr. Kai Anderson has or any other of the physicians. I need to know what's going on with me. Do I need to change something? Do I need to eat better? Do I need to eat more fruit because fruit don't like me? Do I need to drink water? It doesn't. Do I need to drink more water? What is it that I need to do? But you need to tell me, help me understand where I might not understand. I'm not asking for unreasonable things. I'm just advocating for my own health.
And that's the way that it should be. And I hope to think that we're moving away from that power differential. You know your body, you know your life. I don't. You have to teach me, the physician, what I need to know to help you. So it
Right.
should be a shared, mutual, moving forward, what we call person-centered planning as we develop that plan.
Right.
And if you feel like you're not getting that, you should, again, question it and demand to be a equal partner in your medical.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about the challenges in the healthcare system, in the racial disparities in healthcare. Okay, so now we've talked a lot about it, and we've discovered there are some gaps in there, if you will. What are we to do about it? How should we be? What should we be doing other than talking, also to reduce and eliminate the health disparities? What should we be doing?
I think we should be demanding that laws are changed, that legislation is enacted to make sure that everyone has access to health care, to make sure that individuals are not cut off of health care. With the whole Medicaid changes, a lot of individuals are being cut off Medicaid because they may not understand what they have to do to be reevaluated for Medicaid. We need to make it easier to access insurance, that you can have access to care. We need to also demand that the government provides funds to areas that don't have physicians, to encourage physicians to come to that area. And that's something that we do here in Michigan, where we encourage individuals to stay in this area and give them additional stipends if they stay in Michigan and practice in rural areas. So we need more programs like that.
Absolutely, because I've learned there's a lot of people who don't even have health care insurance, right? And then there are people who absolutely can't afford it. So then they're forced to make choices. Do I eat today, or do I try to seek out a doctor? Do I take my medication? Can I afford to get my medication? Medications are so expensive.
Very expensive. I can't begin to talk about what we need to do to make sure that everyone has medication and access to medication. We need to continue to expand telehealth. I think with the pandemic, that was one positive thing that came out of the pandemic, where you can see your doctor at home.
Yes.
Where you don't have to worry about getting to the clinic. We need to make that accessible to everyone and provide those services to everyone. We need to make sure that go ahead.
I was going to say, Dr. Kai, there's a way people can do that too. Is it calling 988 if they need help, mental health wise?
Yes, that is the number if you're in a crisis or just need to talk. And it's solely for mental health emergencies. So yes, please use 988 if you have any mental health crisis.
Great. That's
we need to also mandate these trainings. This should be required of anybody in healthcare. And we are beginning to mandate implicit bias training. I think we should mandate anti-racism training as well.
Awesome. Yes, definitely.
And I think we need to hold institutions liable if they don't provide the training and if they don't continue to promote diversification of the workforce. There should be penalties associated with that.
And that's just not about race either. That's about gender, size, you name it.
Exactly.
Wow. That's good, Dr. Kai.
And I think we are doing a lot of those things. The current President Biden is doing a lot of things to make sure that Medicaid is expanded. We've expanded the amount of care provided to women when they're pregnant. I think it's up to 12 months now in many states. So we're really moving in certain areas to really address some of these healthcare disparities. So it's not all negative news. We are definitely working to address some of these. We just have a lot more work to do.
Okay. So, I just want to add on, because Dr. Kai has really answered this beautifully. And when I think about some of the work that Women of Colors has done with the information campaigns, disparities have been hidden in plain sight for a really long time, right? And so let's be real. The average person does not read research reports that tell them about how Black folks are faring in systems. I know parents don't know how our school systems are doing and how our kids are often left behind, not up to where they should be. There are clearly these disparities that exist when you compare them to their peers in other ethnic groups or socioeconomic brackets. And so I think the more that we shine a light on these disparities and help people to understand that they are telling a story, as we said earlier, that is a matter of life and death, then people will start to feel the urgency to do something about it. You shouldn't have to be a statistic or a victim to care about these issues. And so, I mean, I don't know that there's any one way for us to advocate or protest. There are multiple ways that we can do that, but just getting people the right information about what these disparities are communicating, and communicating these staggering statistics in ways that people can actually wrap their brain around the toll that it's taking on their community, I think that's a huge catalyst for change.
Mm, that's awesome. Wow. That is awesome. So I want to ask another question too. So does good insurance assure good service or equal treatment?
It doesn't ensure it. As you know, as I mentioned, individuals that are physicians have received poor care. So it definitely does not ensure it. I would say it may provide you with access to services based on your insurance that other people may not have, but it definitely does not ensure equitable treatment, because we all live in this society that's been impacted by these issues associated with racism. And as Dr. Pam mentioned, most doctors don't intentionally plan to harm individuals, but because we all live in this society, we have implicit and unconscious biases that affect how we provide care.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So with continuing education, we can hopefully, make sure that the care is equitable
Okay.
for everybody, regardless of your insurance.
So are physicians learning more about DEI and all of that? Do you know in regards to what we're talking about?
As Dr. Pam mentioned, she can speak to this in her role, but this is a good time to address DEI issues, because with the confluence of the pandemic, the deaths that we saw with George Floyd on TV, the whole nation had to deal with racism.
Right. Right.
So,
So this
if oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
so
mean
this is a good time to address it, especially in view of the forces that are pushing back against it right now.
So
Go ahead,
Dr.
Dr.
Pam, that's more in your wheelhouse.
So
So
actually, yeah, I was just going to add on that this is a time that is ripe with opportunities. And what I'm super excited about, even the grant that we recently co-authored to create a curriculum based on those standards for how to help people to become more anti-racist. It's almost like they're saying, give us your best ideas for how we can create learning experiences for people that can help them to become more culturally responsive. And so, the exciting thing about that is it doesn't have to be all textbooky. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be all, oh, learn this definition, learn this new buzzword. We can actually knit in the lived experiences of people. We can actually, create simulations so people can role play and see what it feels like to have someone not see you, not hear you, to tell you to lay down on the floor. Do you know what I'm
right,
saying?
right.
Because honestly, when you say stuff like that, for some people that seems so far-fetched that it's almost hard to believe. I could tell some of my own stories trying to get counseling while in grad school, and you would not believe the things that people said to me in those sessions that were clearly rooted in racism. And in that instance, I did not take them to school on why they were being racist, because that's not what I was there for. I was there seeking help, trying to figure out how to get my head straight and stay on my course. But it is just so essential that we honor everyone's potential contributions to addressing this. And that's why I'm gonna push back on you again when you call yourself average. You understand what I'm saying? Then, it's like, that's the problem. These systems have everybody kind of seeing, like, they're built around the average. Do you know what I'm saying? But you are like a giant in helping to figure out the pulse of a community that you love, right? And that's what I learned from that community-based participatory research project. We have so many power brokers in our community that are untapped, because we've created these hierarchical structures that make some people feel big and some
Yes.
people feel small and some people feel average. And we've got to dismantle that stuff, because that is the essence of structural racism. These artificial hierarchies that we've created that silences some and elevates others' voices. And so honestly, I'm thankful that I have a terminal degree and all of that. But the best education I've ever gotten has come from my mama, my church members, my women of color, Miss Vicky Hill and Evelyn, who've had these crucial conversations with me to help me get on my path. Everybody has the potential to educate somebody else. And that's what I learned a long time ago. Everybody I meet knows something I don't know. And as I wrote in my dissertation, in honor of my big sister and me working it out together we are genius. And I consider that to be true when you think about our collective intelligences as a community. The problem is we're not together, right? So when
Right.
we get together, truly together, then we can create these solutions that are pure genius.
Well,
That
that's
is
what
so.
I love about. Oh, go ahead, Dr.
That is
Kai.
so, Dr. Pam. We are resilient. We are truly resilient. Look at all that we've endured. We have the collective resilience to really address all of this ourselves. We just have to identify it, target it, and put it in action.
And that's what I love about our forums. It's because we do have people that you normally don't hear from. We give them voices, and we hear lived experiences of all types of different enriched stories of their lives to help other people as well as themselves. So it's very important. I love these forums because we can be transparent.
Yes. Yes. You're so true.
Yeah.
We have the answers. It's just a matter of, writing them down and, deciding how to make them happen.
Make them happen and share them. Yes, yes. Vicky, you kind of quiet over.
I'm actually taking it all in. So, I mean, we've had a great discussion tonight, great discussion, talking about the racial disparities in healthcare. We've learned a lot. It's just, like I said, we don't know all the answers, but we're trying to find the answers. And also, we are trying to help others to understand and learn where they might find resources and where they might find the answers as well. It's important that everybody gets this knowledge. It's very important. And the only way we can get that knowledge is for someone to actually tell us what's going on, help us understand. And, like I said, not everyone, I think about the older generation, they're not tech savvy. You know what I mean? They're not tech savvy at all a lot of times. And sometimes I have my challenges. Not that I'm old. Let's put that out there. But it's just, they're just not tech savvy. So it comes a time where we can't say, well, go to the internet and Google. My doctor says stay off Google, because Google, Google tell you you're dying when you ain't anyway. So, but stay off Google. She tells me all the time. I said, sometimes I'll walk in, but Google said, she said, Vicki, I told you stay off Google. So I stay off Google. But the older generation don't have the technology. They don't know how to work it. They don't know what to do. They need, a lot of times, they need somebody. They need a voice. They need somebody to be that voice for them. And I feel like we are that voice. We're trying to be, but there comes a time where we need to come together, and we need to sit there in front of each other and be that voice that way. We need to tell them how to do, because they may not understand how to do it, right?
Right. Right.
You're
I
right.
think I think every clinic should have a listening session to take it from what you guys have done. It should be required.
Yes,
Listening
that would
session
be
on
great.
paper so we can understand, what we need to do better.
That would be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Yes.
mean, like I said earlier, we were talking a lot about the challenges of healthcare, the racial disparities in healthcare, and we're not bashing the medical profession. There are some good doctors out there, but yet there are some doctors that may need to do things a little bit different, to learn a little bit differently, you think about it. Our culture is different than other people's culture. You know what I mean? So you can't treat everybody the same. Everybody has something different in their culture.
Right.
And like I said, somebody that looks like me is going to understand me a whole lot better than somebody who may not look like me. The person that may not look like me is relying on that book sense, where somebody who looks like me knows, I should say, that gut sense. They know because they've been through it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does make sense. But if I could just add in here,
Yeah.
to me, this is like a little thing in the right direction, but it's not a little thing at all. So as you know, I work at Delta College, and we have amazing health professions programs, right? And one of the things that our nursing program invested in was these, I'm going to get it wrong, but these life-size figures. I want to call them mannequins, and they are not mannequins for sure, but their students can practice on them, and they realize that they were all white. And so they have now got multicultural models for them to work on, so that they are simulating what it is like to be in a world where you have to touch someone whose skin is different for you. You have to understand. I mean, I had a long discussion about how you care for an African American person's hair if you're a nurse practitioner and you're doing that work. And so there are lots of good people that are making strides. And so while I do think it's important for us to shine a light on the disparities, I feel like that almost needs to be the backdrop, but the main thing needs to be examples of what people are doing that is actually the evidence of anti-racist practice and best practices for how us to get about changing this stuff. Because there people, if I could give this one other example, because it's from my own personal life, but it shook me, right? I took a bunch of kids to one of my various field trips where they were out swimming. And one of my young men, who shouldn't have been in that pool because he didn't know really how to swim, almost drowned, right? They got him out of the pool, and the little teenage lifeguard could not administer CPR properly to him because she was so uncomfortable putting her mouth on an African American male's mouth. And if I did not have a Black male with me who knew how to administer CPR, I would have lost that child on that day. And it has just shook me forever to see that real example of someone who knew how to do something well. If she could have practiced it the way that she had been trained on a person who she was accustomed to having physical contact with. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
so that example has just left an indelible imprint on me about how important it is for us to prepare all people who touch lives for all people.
All people. Absolutely.
I have to share something from my training. I trained several years ago, a long time ago, and my anatomy books, it was always white bodies. I never saw in my anatomy books a Black individual depicted in those books. And I came across an internet recently, and there's a individual that is producing a book of skin diseases on Black skin, and also producing an anatomy book with Black figures. And I just kind of took it for granted. I never even thought about it, never even questioned. Why do I not see Black bodies in my anatomy books? Why do I not see brown skin in my medical textbooks? So we just kind of take it for granted that this is the way that it is, and not recognizing how much that's affecting all of us in the system that we live in. So it is important to actively work at changing the way that we do things to prevent that from happening.
You were so right. And I think it took me being in higher ed for so long to realize those books didn't fall out the sky. Somebody's writing those books. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what you don't know. And therefore, we need more academics who are writing books that reflect the full spectrum of the human diversity. And furthermore, the content needs to be made accessible to everyday folk so that they can go in there equipped with the knowledge that they need to advocate for themselves as well. It can't be so heady that everyday people can't be a part of participating in their own healthcare plan. And so I think that when we shine a light on the progress as well as how far we have yet to go simultaneously, then I think we'll start getting some of that momentum, Vicki, that you were calling for when you were like, help me figure out what the call to action is so that we can really empower people to be change agents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, ladies, we've done a lot of talking this evening, talking about our racial disparities in healthcare. We've shared a lot of personal stories, as well as, we've talked about some resources that people may be able to pick up on and check out things. We talked about being your own advocate for your health. We've talked a lot about that. Some good knowledge from all of you, and if we all just kind of take it all in, I believe that we can get a little further. I know that there's still a long ways to go. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's not going to be. But as long as we keep going at it, as long as we keep trying, as long as we keep pushing forward, like one said, we need to talk to our legislators. Okay. Well, we also need to, do that as well. But as long as we keep trying to move forward, I believe we will get somewhere. But it takes, how they always said it takes a village to raise a child? It takes a village. It takes all of us together. Together we stand, divided we fall. Miss Evelyn.
I just want to share some real quick. I won't take up much time, but I just want to thank Dr. Pam for helping us develop. If you could see this book, this is our final report. It's like 60 pages. Yeah, almost 60 pages. The racial disparities in behavioral healthcare grant. Because she was our principal discovery facilitator, and she helped us pull this report together. And I just want to publicly thank her again for helping us with this huge accomplishment. And I also want to thank Dr. Kai Dr. Pam and Vicky, you always are awesome hosts. Thank you always and our co-chair, Women of Color's co-chair, and Alpha Media for hosting these forums, giving us 90 minutes. It's
Absolutely.
awesome. Awesome. Women of Colors and our Women of Colors Community Forum Committee. We want to thank all of them for just being there and supporting us in all that we do. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
So,
the
ladies,
listeners too.
absolutely. So, ladies, thank you so very much for doing this forum tonight. Time to have a conversation. As I said, we haven't been here in a little while, but we're getting back to it. We've got a lot of things to talk about. So, make sure, I believe there's a second part. Is that correct?
Yeah, oh yes, there is. There's a second part. This part for time the conversation was called Health Matters, Mind, Body, and Soul. And the second part is going to be hosted by our own Dr. Kai Anderson. And it's going to include Shirtoris Carter, the founder of Grateful Love Foundation, and Sherry Long, the president of Heart of the City Development Center. And that's going to be held on August the 25th at 7 p.m. Friday, 7 p.m., August 25th.
And you'll find us right here again. So, ladies, thank you so very much. I appreciate all of you. And once again, we made it happen, right?
Always.
All right. Well, have a great night.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Good
You
night,
too.
everyone.